I'm going to put out some information most of America doesn't know about. And every time I think about it, from way back then, it still disturbs me. This is a periodic intelligence report, the truth about the Korean War. The United Nations is the greatest fraud in history. Its purpose is to destroy the United Nations. When this guy was a young officer flying missions in Korea, unknowingly under the command of the Soviet General of the United Nations Security Council, he could have never understood how the enemy knew so much about them, as it was broadcast every day over the radio. Our wives' names, children's names, squadron commander, flight numbers. The North Koreans knew when we were coming, how many there were, what type of aircraft we were flying, and even the targets we were to hit. And the Navy and the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, they all suffered too. All of our military operations had to be forwarded by radio to the Soviet commander of the United Nations Security Council at the United Nations building in New York City for approval before our forces went into action against the North Koreans and Red Chinese. The Soviet commander of the United Nations Security Council then delayed the battle plans until he had used the radios at the United Nations building in New York to relay all the battle plans information. The enemy then contacted and relayed these same battle plans to their communist forces in the field. The enemy knew when to move from an area and when to attack our smaller fighting forces. They knew beforehand when we were coming, and they knew how many of us they were. They knew everything about us all the time, 24 hours a day. I later found the same form of treason was used against our forces in Vietnam. All information regarding every battle plan in Vietnam was given to the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong troops in the field during the entire war. The enemy knew our every move at all times. Our troops were like sheep to the slaughter in both Korea and Vietnam. Like blind fools, we sent our combat plans to the enemy for approval. That was a standing joke among the fighter pilots. To this day, the Soviets and someone from their satellite countries are the only ones who can command the United Nations World Police Forces. Each and every one of us who served in Korea or Vietnam served under the total command of a Soviet general. Here are the names of the Soviets, okay? Okay, here we go. 1946 to 49, 49 to 53, 53 to 54, 58 to 59. You see this? You're not going to win any wars, not in their police actions. You're not supposed to. I'm not going to read everything. I'll just put this up here and you... It was a traitor President Harry S. Truman himself, who refused to allow General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of the United Nations Fighting Forces in Korea, to bomb the bridges at the Yellow River, over which the Chinese Communist troops came by the hundreds of thousands to kill and wound our soldiers. Truman and the Soviet general in charge of the United Nations totally handcuffed MacArthur in all instances. He was in command of the fighting forces in Korea, but not in command of the United Nations position. Okay? The Soviet general held that position of power and authority over MacArthur and all of the United Nations fighting forces in Korea. The same held true for Vietnam. When MacArthur woke up to the treason in the Soviets and the United Nations, he executed one of the greatest military performers ever ventured in modern warfare. His dangerous, magnificent military engagement and sea landing in Incheon on September 15, 1950 enabled the military forces to slaughter the communist forces, destroy their massive supply dumps, and put the Red Chinese, North Koreans, and their Soviet advisors on the run. In other words, MacArthur kicked ass. MacArthur never asked permission from the United Nations to perform this secret military operation. MacArthur handpicked close and loyal military officers in doing so, and they kept a tight lip on the entire operation. Originally, our forces were to never win any battles as planned by the Soviet generals of the United Nations. MacArthur realized this treason and took positive action not only to save the lives of these fighting forces and destroy the enemy and their supply dumps, but also creating the turning point of the Korean War. For this positive action, General Douglas MacArthur was relieved of his command of the United Nations fighting forces in Korea by the traitor President Harry Truman. President Truman feared MacArthur so much that prior to General MacArthur returning to the United States from Korea, Truman hid out at Camp David for over 3 weeks in fear of being arrested by General MacArthur, who was a 5-star general and in command of all military forces in the United States. This allowed the controlled press in the United States time to attack MacArthur on all fronts. Even before he returned home from Korea, big headlines in the monthly magazines of the United States described MacArthur as like a Hitler. With cunning control of their national news outlets over the minds of the masses of the United States, these same internationalists turned the minds of the people in the United States against MacArthur, the same man who had just saved the lives of thousands of their sons and with that daring military move against the wishes of the United Nations Command, routing the Red Chinese. Now you know the real truth of what really happened behind the scenes during the Korean conflict between traitor Truman and General MacArthur, the real hero. He was denied the right to bomb any of the electric plants by the United Nations. It was later broadened to include every plant in North Korea which was capable of furnishing electrical power to Manchuria and Siberia. He also refused to let him bomb the important supply center Rakhine, which was not in Manchuria, but many miles from the border, forward supply for the Chinese. Same exact treason was occurred against us again in our military forces in Vietnam. But it was far more vile and dirty in length of time than our soldiers were betrayed. Our operations were always known to the enemy in advance through sources in Washington. Information had to be relayed to them and then sent back. But anyway, people, that's what is going on in the United States. And then you have this poor guy, Michael New. This poor kid, he went up against Clinton, the Attorney General of the United Nations, and Madeleine Albright. I mean, that's quite a bit. You get a guy that's a patriot and an American, and that's what they do to him. They wanted him to change his uniform. They made him change it to a they made him change the army patch from one side to the other shoulder, replaced it with a flag with a UN badge and insignia. He would also wear a UN blue beret or helmet. Every soldier takes an oath. Now, here's the enlisted man's oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of officers appointed over me accordingly to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. That's the oath you take. But they completely changed all this for this Michael New. They changed it. They went in and they did an unlawful, unconstitutional thing by not letting Congress in on this. See here. Clinton's big lie. Okay, under the mission under the UN Participation Act 1945 requires congressional approval. Approval is required because the Constitution provides for a balance of power. The President is not king. When America sends her sons and daughters into harm's way, you know, it should be the will of the people, we the people. This responsibility and limitation on the President's authority was something else Bill Clinton dodged. You see, Bill Clinton passed an order. What was that? The presidential directive. What? You've got to give me a minute, people. I got to remember that presidential. Let's see. Hang on there. Right here. PDD, Presidential Directive. It's unconstitutional. Nothing in the Constitution even remotely suggests such of use of American military forces, but Clinton moved Mayor along with his unwarranted. Yeah, see, they never showed this to anybody. What is the Presidential Directive? It surrendered sovereignty and required American soldiers to serve as mercenaries in the New World Order, taking orders from foreign officers. The secret order, never released to the public, places U.S. troops under UN commanders. Now, see, this is just a recent thing. Now, before, you know, you had these stupid peacekeeping forces. No such thing as peacekeeping forces. You will never win a war when you're under the United Nations command, because all their commanders are Russian, Chinese, Soviets. You're not going to let you win a war. They've got to demoralize the American people, thinking they can't win a war. You catching on yet, people? Please, for God's sake, catch on. I'll make a thing on this. This fella here, he was talking about the United Nations and how bad it was, and nobody listened to him either. And he was a congressman. So people, I'm telling you, wake up to the conspiracy that's going on in the United States of America and has been since they adopted the doggone United Nations. But people were scared. They were completely sick of war after World War II, and these schemers found a fertile field to exploit. They appealed to the churches, schools, every other organization they could reach out on the basis the best way to secure peace in the world was to organize the United Nations group. Okay, people, I'm going to end this.